It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
Welcome to the Lekker Rugby Pod. Today we have the defender of scrum virtues, that heaving, seething, brutal ballet, that organism on the field that people try to not like, but we love. He's a budding broker, he's a professional, he's a beer bum, he's a beer head, he's a bishop's boy, high performance man, a scrum mentor from under nines all the way up to the top. He can build a braai or he can build you a scrum machine. He's a writer. He's also a media dude. He's a VP till he dies and probably even afterwards, posthumously. UCT Bishop's boy anchored an 8-year win streak over Rondebosch, for those of you that know about that history. 89 Craven Week. And his name, don't call him Andrew, is Tank Lanning. How's it, Tank?
How's it, Harry? Flipping tremendous to be on the podcast with you. It's obviously it's a very famous podcast now, so I'm honored. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, we had to do some serious vetting on you, though. You know, I was on your Instagram and I saw all these videos of 3 guys on all fours and on the guy on top of them on all fours using their necks as a base. I mean, in some countries, this is illegal. What are you doing there, brother? You have all these different ways to get people's necks ready for the scrum, don't you?
Yeah, we do indeed. So we call them primers in coach language. And prior to any sort of scrum session or even in a preseason, you'll be doing some sort of primer. And I mean, even at the pro level, these guys forget to do neck. So I always like to include some sort of neck work in a primer. And, you know, part of our job, it's I suppose, it's like any educator, you've got to try and keep a smile on a face or keep them interested. So I spend when I have insomnia, which is flipping often, I think up ways of working necks, cores, shoulders, traps in any sort of scrum primer.
Yeah, there's a great scene in the Lions doco on YouTube called Ultimate Test, where Tommy Freeman learns that his roommate is going to be Pierre Schoeman. And I'm thinking, of course, also the snoring factor. But the first thing that Freeman wants to do is scrum with Pierre. And Pierre says, your neck's a bit long. So I wanted to talk about you. Is it a matter of making your neck wider so that it's less long, or do you just have to have a special kind of neck to be a prop?
Yeah, so I mean, I like to see no neck at all. I just want the head attached to a set of shoulders. Look at it; it's a personal passion point because I got a compression fracture that stopped me from playing at the age of 24. So I'm very aware of, without getting too serious too soon, of how important it is to have a strong neck as a scrummager. And so I joke about having a head attached to a shoulder, but I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. And if, you know, the other thing I say to the guys that I coach is that, yes, we're working on scrumming right now, but you think about you going into a tackle, if you're going into cleaner breakdown, if you're going up to going into any sort of contact situation in rugby, you're getting basically, I call it gorilla, some guys call it bear. I mean, you know, you're getting into that strong scrumming low body position. And so, you know, even flanks I work with because it's so important. And there's, you know, the breakdown for me is a neck injury waiting to happen. People talk about trying to make the scrum safe, and they do this ridiculous 1.5 meter rule. But I promise you that cleaning of the breakdown is industrial these days. So yeah, it's a passion point for me, and I'll try and make guys' necks stronger any chance I get.
Yeah, on that, actually, it's a fascinating point. The breakdown has risen in terms of numbers, right? So scrums have gone from 32, 31 a game in the 87, 91 World Cups down to 20s, down to 13, 14 a game. There's even been some recent incidents of a ref kind of apologizing to 2 starting props, leaving, saying, hey, sorry, guys, we didn't have a scrum. Meanwhile, carries, rocks, and attendant tackles, you know, gone to, you know, a guy has to make 160, a team has to make 169 tackles a game in the last World Cup. And then you have rucks going to 160, 150 total. On a safety issue, you know, with the scrums now forming, well-educated, proper certified props going through this stuff, it doesn't seem like rugby needs to hinge everything on safety about scrums. It's more about a definitional kind of the game. I mean, that's how we get our numbers. I think it's beautiful. You and I agree on this, so we're talking to the choir. But how do we convey that to maybe the casual fan or the guy right now who's just now starting to tune into rugby?
Yeah, look, it's an excellent point. I personally think, and this might be controversial, but I think the ponytails who are marketing rugby at the moment have got it completely wrong. Everyone says the Varsity Cup is hugely successful, and it is. And I was privileged to spend 5 years coaching the UCT first team in the Varsity Cup, and the rugby is excellent. But the reason people say it's successful is because it gets big crowds. But I promise you, they're not there for the rugby. And what's happened is that they've turned Monday nights into a piss-up, which is tremendous, especially for students. And now, if you look at seven-a-side rugby, people they think that people can't spell the entire word SEVENS, so now they go SVNS. I mean, do they think rugby fans are like totally retarded? So, and I have a feeling that, as I call it, the ponytails don't believe in rugby as the actual entertainment. And so what we've got now is a hybrid sort of crowd that is half there for the party and half there for the rugby. Whereas if we just back the product, and the product is an exceptional product as a way of entertainment. I mean, obviously, rugby now chases the entertainment rand. I mean, that's our job. But if you don't back the product, then you're in a world of hurt. So I think we kind of and what's happened is that now people think that scrums aren't entertaining, or a body has decided that scrums aren't entertaining. Of course, 13 resets is not entertaining. No one wants to see 13 resets of a bloody scrum. But the scrum is a thing of beauty, and it's a truly unique part of rugby. And as you say, the numbers are dropping. Sometimes you'll see, I mean, I once saw an entire half of no scrum. It was traumatic. But realistically, you're probably getting between 8 and 16 scrums, depending on the weather. And the people that tell me that, why do we need to focus on scrums? I tell you what, you get one. If you just have one scrum in a game and you get that wrong, and the opposition either get a pen or an easy exit or they score from it, you lose the game. So it remains integral to rugby, and certainly an integral way of restarting the game. But nowadays, just getting yourself a pen which gets you, as I say, an easy exit, or deep into the attack zone.
Yeah, exactly. I've given coaches this sort of hypothetical. I'll give you 5 bad things happen to you. You lose, you spill the ball 5 times, you have 5 line breaks against you, you have 5 charge downs, 5, whatever. I go, and you lose 5 scrums kind of in a row. That's the worst. They almost all go, no, I don't want that, because it's the exit, it's the entry, it's the card, and it's perhaps the perception by the ref that forever, the whole match, you're screwed. Listen, I think that sports that are burgeoning, exploding, and gathering eyes and bums, they play up to whatever their weird thing is. They don't run away from it. We spend too far much time researching people who don't love us and say, could you fall in love with us, please? Instead of, in France, where it's exploding, sold out, every attendance going up, they love the scrum. They get excited for it. The drums are going, people's into it. When I was in Marseille for the the pool match, people on the street, Scots versus Bok fans, what do they want to do? They want to scrum with me. So we in the street we're scrumming. You're not going to run around and tackle someone but you can scrum, and it is definitional. It's dispositive. I like, not in a vacuum now, the pinging of the scrum, because if you're going to have fewer of them, then make them matter even more. Knife edge, 12-11, close out the Rugby World Cup. What if you didn't have to? What if you could just take a knee, like some sports? What if you could just throw in the towel? No, the Boks had to convene a scrum, and they knew that the All Blacks, with a hell of a scrum, was going to come at them all the way. Don't you love that the end of the game is that dramatic, kind of mostly because of the scrum? There's no easy out.
Yeah, I mean, spot on. I mean, as you say, preaching a bit to the converted here, but and I think what's happening in Springbok rugby is that scrumming is becoming sexy again because it's such a weapon for the box to the point where a whole bunch of South Africans get grumpy with World Rugby because we think they've got it in for us. I'm pretty sure that it won't be long before there'll be a rule against lifting a player to take a pass because the box have done it. Don't worry that the Michael under 13 Cs did it first, or that the Paul Rose, the second side, did it first. So we love to be a victim in South Africa. But the one thing that is happening and has happened is that the box scrum has totally and utterly dominated world rugby. I mean, the French have certainly retaliated, and they are picking some huge men. My oath. I was at the World under 20. It was in Stellenbosch last year, and I got in a lift with a few of them. Sure, but I mean, I fear getting in a lift just when it's me. But I promise you, when I was with 4 or 5 of those guys, they're easily north of 150 kgs. So the French have definitely responded to this box scrum just by picking sheer size. And Harry, I think you're spot on. I think what's happened is that instead of picking the unique part of rugby, one of which is the scrum, they've said, well, let's rather give you a free Boerewors roll and at halftime we'll bring on Kurt Darren or someone, and that's why you must come to the rugby. Instead, what the Americans have done very well, the American football, is that they've gone stats crazy, stats heavy, and perhaps that in the preamble, I saw a couple of tweets this week about how people just don't turn into the preamble because it's just so crap. But if it was all about stats and all about numbers, and if we had some drone footage of scrummages and drone footage of Andrew Porter and how he swings in, and someone actually with a little bit of rugby knowledge talking about how this is an issue, and okay, so how do the box or how does any other side counter that? And then there's a little clip of there's a small thing, like we talk about at 1 o'clock, which is the entire pack scrumming a little bit towards 1 o'clock so that your swinging loosehead then gets smashed out. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's only one of one of us, but I have a feeling that as people grew in their knowledge of scrum, so it would become more interesting, and so would then the product that is rugby. The people that I speak to, obviously, it's mostly the flat-eared oaks who have either been in scrum or enjoy it. I mean, they love hearing about a scrum, and instead of a commentator should not be allowed to say the word dark arts. It's just bullshit, man. I mean, imagine there was a commentator who said, "Wow, that was a big hit from the 12. The dark arts of a big hit."
It's dismissive. It's dismissive. Yeah. And it puts everything into one box, and it fails to acknowledge the incredible elaborate technique of the scrum. It's interesting, and I think what they're missing is, you refer to the NFL, John Madden, the famous late commentator, he made the line of scrimmage, coming from scrummage, interesting because he picked his hog team. He talked about when you get your hand inside the armpit of the jersey and explained the dark art. So you wouldn't just say dark art. He would say, no, that's a guy who really knows how to make that armpit turn, and the differences. What is a loosehead trying to do? What is a tighthead trying to prevent? What is the relationship between Bongi and France? What is the relationship between Ox Nche and Malcolm? That. Don't you think that it's almost crawling more into the sophisticated game that is played in the scrum, not dismissing it, because then you're dooming yourself to that 2 minutes or 1 minute where it's dead time. You have Flatman over in the Prem sideline whispering, almost like a golf commentator, going, okay, so what's going to happen here is, Thomas Tutoy is going to try to get into the collarbone here, but he's going to, that. Don't you think that's what we need?
Look, we 100% need that. It's not even a debate. I actually think it could go in tandem with refereeing the scrum. There's so many, I have so much time for referees. They get it in the flipping guts all the time. But I've spoken to a number of them over the years. They're making decisions per second that not even heart surgeons or brain surgeons are making. So I feel for them. So, I mean, why not rethink how we officiate the scrum? It's factually impossible for one guy to have a look at the up, down, foot up, left, right of all the of the entire front row.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we've got a TMO. I would start with having a scrum guy with him, or I mean, with technology, he doesn't have to be in the TMO. I mean, he could be in his flipping hut in Mauritius, but he could, even if he or she was just looking at drone footage. Most games you're getting some sort of above footage, and every scrum you've got some drone footage. So straight away you're looking at who's swinging, and these days all looseheads are swinging. It's just by how much. And then he or she could be making a call on that. It's pretty easy for a assistant referee to be looking at foot up, and that would leave the ref just looking at hinging, which is or pancaking. So if we talk about hinging, it's normally to do with a loosehead who's hinged at the hips, and you'll see his elbow hit the ground first.
So his hips are high, and then he cannot support that, and his elbow goes to the turf.
Correct. So, and that's normally a loosehead's fault. And then if a tighthead has taken it down, we normally call it pancaking, and that normally sees his hips hit the ground first. So he's gone overextended, which means he's got his feet too far back, so his legs would be straight instead of bent. And you'll see his groin or his hips will hit the ground first, and that's pancaking. And if a ref is just generally able to look at that with ARs looking at foot up, and then some drone footage, I mean, you're going to get, number one, a much better officiated set piece, but then two, also some tremendous stuff to chat about, pre-game, during game, post-game. And I think, rugby in South Africa needs that. We do get the premiere, so it is, and I try and watch as much as I can, and I've seen Flatman in action. It's great to see. Motiga is also excellent. He's on TikTok and Instagram doing some amazing stuff. Huge insight, and for me, the fact that there are Instagram and TikTok accounts that focus directly on scrumming tells me that people are a bit more interested in knowing what's going on. And then knowledge is power, and then the scrum suddenly becomes a thing of beauty to the fan and not just the players.
100%. South Korea has shown that in their series that was all about the scrum. For 1 hour, you're watching scrum on sort of a reality TV. The people are glued to it. Alex Corbicero in the MLR is really explaining scrum, and the American audience are into it. They like the scrum. They actually perceive a better avenue to going from number 50 in the world to number 7 or 6 through the scrum, because they think, well, that fits our body styles. I work a lot in Mexico. So in Monterrey, Mexico, it's easier for me to make a team better with they can overpower Jamaica in the scrum than trying to do all the things on attack that you need to do to clean 50 rucks and have a smart fly off. It's really difficult to breed that stuff. But I can find a fat guy who can be strong, who's got no neck, who's got a serious appetite for destruction and violence. And by the way, these guys are really marketable too. Ox with his cake. These are funny people. In fact, disproportionately intelligent, interesting people. I might chat with Frans Malherbe. He's talking about citrus trees to me and dams in the Karoo. Talking to Ox, he's talking about his feet and space and geography and see yourself. And then, talking to Beast, it's all about clothing lines. So, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir again, but props are really lovely guys. And I hate the fact that we kind of sell away from them. So now that we premised that, and I think it's poised, and I think people really respond, let's get into how you teach the scrum. Take us through What is the difference between a loosehead and a tighthead for the people who aren't as involved in this? How different is it? Can you swing easily, or do you kind of have to do one or the other now?
Yeah. So, to my mind, it's like playing fullback and scrum half. They are two just very different animals. When I talk about loosehead and tighthead, a loosehead is scrumming against one guy, whereas a tighthead is scrumming against two guys. So his head goes between the loosehead and the hooker. So that's why he's called a tighthead. It's literally that simple. His head is tight between two heads, whereas the loosehead is, his head is loose and goes down the side of the tighthead. So you can opt out as a loosehead. Your primary job is to try and get under a tighthead's chest and break his sternum. That is your job. However, if you are not particularly good at that aspect of your game, you can slide down the loosehead and get away pretty quickly from a scrum, and that's why you'll see a loosehead doing a little bit more in open plays, because they get away a bit quicker. Whereas a tighthead,
Jan Hendrik Wessels right now for the Bulls, he's like an extra loosey.
Spot on, and he's now finding himself in that dreadful sort of utility space where, yes, it might get you on every bench for the rest of your life, but will it get you a start? But you're right. At school he was a lock for a long period of time. Then he was hooker, and the worst showman, the worst thing that could possibly have happened to him as he came out of school was Jake played him at tighthead. And for the life of me, because I know Jake's going through a tough time, but I tell you what, he knows his way around a rugby field. And just as a specific example, as a tight forward, you are normally you coming into your prime 26, 27, even 28. That's why these folks, Brocky played till he was 40.
And he always looked like he was 40, even when he was 25.
Funny. I was actually working with him this morning at the HBC. He's looking after the Currie Cup, and I'm looking after the under-19s. But we cross over a bit. He's looking extremely young. He's looking younger than when he went on the field last year. But
how do you pick that, though? Let's say you get in a 15-year-old, 14-year-old guy. He's got sort of basically a prop shape. But what distinguishes the loosehead from the tighthead? How do you slot him in?
So from your tighthead, I want him cut from a big block of granite. I need no movement from his neck. I need a huge chest. I need a core that's as strong as an iron pole, and quads that look like Wilco. You need an immovable object. As I say, you cut from granite, you hit like a sledgehammer, and you just do not move. And that is your job as a tighthead, especially against a loosehead. I'm using Porter, and I get some stick on Twitter because I call him out, but he is tragic in terms of how he has got away with coming in with a swinging arse. Refs are now picking that up. But so as a tighthead, you need to counter that. And generally, Harry, your tighthead and your hooker would work together as a unit, because you take on two people in front of you. You don't have the option of opting out, and you'll work nicely as a unit with your hooker and your tighthead just being the anchor, and then your loosehead is free to be a bit more attacking. My coaching philosophy is that I like my scrum to be as attacking as possible. So I'll coach them. Generally, like using France. Probably the best tighthead South Africa has produced. But in recent times, he's got quite defensive, and you watch him. He'll be fairly overextended. He'll be chest on, and he'll be using that big body of his, immovable, but also not particularly attacking. He was much more attacking in his youth. So I like a guy who's got a little bit more. So you'll see. You either talk about overextended, which is long legs, or cramped, which is your knees are 90 or even more. And and you want to find a happy balance. So as a loosehead, you can be nice and attacking. You are 90 degrees, your leg angle, you're getting as much swing as the ref will allow, and you're trying to get under a tighthead and you're trying to break your sternum. Whereas a tighthead is you going hard, sledgehammer, straight, big body, ear on shoulder, no space on the right-hand side. So you keep that loosehead in his box, and you drop that right shoulder on the back of his neck, and you keep him in his box. So that's the major difference. One is from underneath, coming left to right, and the other one is almost coming down, like landing a plane and dropping that right shoulder on the back of a neck. And you'll see the successful tightheads against a guy like Ox. If you leave Ox to, I talk about keeping guys in their box. If you let him out of his box, he is going to murder you. If you find a way for that sledgehammer hit to hit and then sink and drop your neck on the back of, drop your shoulder on the back of his neck, then he has to stay in his box and he stays in that crouch position. Then it's very difficult for him to do anything. Of course, he's exceptional, so it's hard to keep him in his box. But realistically, that's the sort of difference between the tighthead and the loosehead.
Yeah, and so it brings up, you in this role as scrum coach, scrum mentor. You have Don Human becoming one of the most beloved and favorite coaches out there because of his work. It's highly, it's individualized. It's dynamic. It keeps changing throughout a season. How the refs call it. Franz Malherbe told me, he does a lot of ref chat. He's like, "Did you like that?" And he literally in the game, if they will chat along, he will adjust. He talked about being comfortable. Ox, when he talked to me, was about the uncomfortableness. He wanted to find his opponent's uncomfortable place, and then he waits, the art of the wait, and he talks about seeing yourself. That makes a lot of sense to me. How do you teach your young guys to see what they look? We talk about pictures to the ref. How do you know where your body is when you're looking at the ground and you're involved in like a sumo wrestling?
I mean, it's an exceptional point, and that's why our video is just such a key part of any sort of coaching. Often I'll work with a lighty or a young guy, and I'll get him onto a machine, and I'll ask him, "Do you think your bum is below or above your shoulders?" And he'll say, "Coach, way above my shoulders." And then I'll take a picture and I'll show it, and it's like 15 centimeters below his shoulders. And it's just, and over a period of time, it's just about, it's a very, very key component of how I coach, is that I need these guys to know what position their body is in. So one, you get to know, okay, when is my bum in line with my shoulders? And when do I need that? When is it below and when is it above? And then just back to the point about the loosehead and the tighthead. So generally, your loosehead's bum could be slightly lower than his shoulders because you're going to punch in and come upward under to the chest, where a tighthead is more like landing a plane, and his bum would be a little bit above his shoulders because he can come down on the back of the loosehead. But it is truly amazing, and I'm talking even pro players sometimes struggle to know their bum to shoulder height ratio, and the only thing that you can do is take pictures, and then you coach a bit or work a bit, take another picture, and then as soon as they know when they're in that prime position, then you coach them. Okay, how do I get into that? Given all the variants that happen in a scrum.
Okay, so let's sort of take a scenario here. I'm a loosehead, and the opponent has the feed on the 5 meter. So defensive scrum for them, attacking scrum for me, green light. Or maybe the coach says, "No, wait for the next one," whatever. But let's say it's green light. Am I trying to separate their hooker from their tighthead? Is that my main job?
No. The loosehead is trying to yeah. Well, I suppose a tighthead would be looking for the seam. Talk about the seam. It's the same as in attack and defense, and you're trying to find a seam in the opposition defense. You'll try and see a disconnection on defense, and they would talk about a seam. So a tighthead would be looking to split the seam between loosehead and hooker, whereas a loosehead is trying to get the tighthead out of the scrum, but there is no seam because he's outside of the tighthead.
But that's more of a pop. Is that more of a pop where you see the tighthead cannot take that stress and has to stand up?
Correct. And nowadays, so refs, so you're not allowed to scrum upwards. However, you're also not allowed to pull out the scrum, and that's why I feel for refs. You know, a loosehead's job is basically to pop the tighthead, but you've got to do it without scrumming upwards. And that's why I say you craftily get under that tighthead, you go forward instead of up, and then the tighthead opts out. So that's your job. So you have popped the tighthead, but you haven't pushed upwards. And that is an art. That is a very difficult thing to get right.
See, that's fun, though. If I know before the scrum, if you set that up because you've got 30 seconds to say it, and then I'm watching for that, that's fun. I think any fan will go, ooh, he did it or he didn't do it. That's cool.
Yeah, 100%. And I must say, I like your idea about a green light. So, you know, 5 meters out, you're often not going to get the green light from your head coach because you'll have a strike move there. So if you 5 out, 15 in, got a lovely blind side, you've probably got a strike move which is going to see either 8-9, 15, 8-9, 14 coming in on a hard line. So you won't get the green light. What you'll get is a demand for a totally immovable scrum. However, there's the coach that we all know fairly well, Dobbo. He loves green light attacking scrum, and even when they've got the pen, he'll take the scrum again. I say, Dobbo, you know, why? You've got the pen. I mean, kick and maul. He says, no, I'm going for the yellow card. And it's become such a big thing. And, you know, the Boks do the same thing. You know, it was truly amazing. It was this year. Do you remember when Frans Malherbe got yellow carded?
Yeah.
I mean, it was totally and utterly unheard of. But when you spoke earlier about presenting pictures, and that is what it's become about. It's a little bit sad, really. But you got to present a certain picture to a ref.
Yeah, I tried to black that out of my mind, actually. Now you brought it back, I'm triggered.
Yeah, but you know, if you keep presenting poor pictures, I mean, the ref actually has no option. I'll remember that day till I die. I mean, Malherbe, one of the best tightheads the game's produced, and you know, everyone has their off day. And then
it's a very fine line, though, isn't it, on age, though? Because you look at the props, they're hardly ever 25 or less, and they get to, a lot of times, you know, like Fouché is getting there 32 years old. Even a guy like Ox Nche, we think is kind of young. He's 29, almost 30. But then you also, Father Time will get you. And, you know, the scar tissue, the accumulation, you know, watching James Slipper scrum right now. It's like there's no movement in the spine anymore. So sort of what is the sweet spot, you know, for a test prop nowadays, in age, I mean?
Yeah, so I mean, how long's a piece of string? You know, Brocky made it to 40. I made it to 24. You know, it's just going to depend on how your body handles. These days, the set has become fairly controlled. In fact, more than fairly controlled. Crouch, bind, set. You're working with centimeters on the set, so it's become a fairly safe space. In fact, more of your front row injuries are coming from cleanouts or from steps. You know, and then it's how long your knees will last. So these guys I think are lasting even longer than in the old days. You know, the Wild West. Certainly when I played, I mean, those two packs would come from, you know, basically Outer Mongolia and Inner Mongolia, and you just hammer. And there were, you know, you used to break necks in those days. So now it's more controlled. But you know, I'm not giving you an answer because there isn't a direct answer, but or there's no 100% defined answer. But I do think, you know, you're easily getting into your mid-30s, and then it's craftiness together with experience, together with better training that turns you into. It gives you the guile to become like a seriously good front row. So I'm thinking sweet spot probably, you know, 32 to 35.
Hmm. You have a scrum machine. Obviously, the best way to scrum in the end is to scrum, but there's also things you can do. Prepare yourself. Even the pre-test, you look at what the props do for the box. It's all kinds of things. Obviously, they lift as well, so they got to do a lot of that stuff. But scrum machines. I've seen some interesting ones. I've seen one in France. I like yours because it has different sizes. So talk to us a little bit about your particular machinery and what it simulates, because the load of a scrum is ridiculous. The kilojoules used. So talk to us through about what that scrum machine can sort of approximate.
Yeah, so I think the most amazing one that I've never seen it live, but in Europe, and I think one of the Japanese clubs have got one where it's attached to a wall and it's on a 5G pitch, and you can control whether the left or right hand side comes hard at you. So if you're going to scrum against Porter, I don't mean to pick him out, but let's say you're going to scrum against Ireland, and they're going to come hard from the left. You can set up for that left pad to come at you harder than the right pad does. So that as a pack, you need to find a way to combat that. So it's based on pressure gauges. It's totally automated. It fights back. It can go. It's just the most amazing machine. But the one that it's a friend of mine actually, and I got together. The school I coach at, the primary school's machine broke. It was an old wooden thing, and they needed a new one. And my mate and I needed a project, so we built a scrum machine, and it's double-sided. And it's often the boys ask me, "Wow, can we have both packs going at the same time?" But obviously not, because all you do is dig yourself into the ground. But what a double-sided pack machine does for you is allow. So let's say you're working with two packs. You have one pack on one side, and they hit the machine straight away. The other pack can hit the other side of the machine, and then you can go live. So you go A pack machine, B pack machine, live. A pack machine, B pack machine, live. And these days we're lucky if we're getting 18, 20, 22 minutes would be a big block in a week. So as coaches, we're looking to be as efficient as we possibly can. So the double-sided machine helps there. And then the other sort of small tweak that we made was we decided to go with 3 pads instead of 4. Most scrum machines these days you'll see have 4 pads, but it's fairly unrealistic because your loosehead now is scrumming against 2 guys. And as I said right at the beginning of the show, is that the reason he's called a loosehead is because he doesn't scrum against 2 guys. He only scrums against 1 guy. So what we did was we made the left-hand side pad slightly wider because the loosehead and the hooker have to attack that. The 2 pads are a little bit smaller, and we're just trying to make it a little bit more realistic. But it was a very fun project. I must say, I loved it.
Yeah, so the loosehead does have to learn how to scrum in space, which is actually difficult because you've got a flank and a lock pushing up your bum, and you might get twisted into a Porter-like shape when you didn't want to be. So there's that, and then there's the other part, which is the tighthead is always scrumming uphill, kind of. I mean, it's always against him. Everything is loaded up against him. So he has to get the feeling of that. I am also interested in the hooker's role in this. We talked about the tighthead, the loosehead, and I think a lot of us understand it. We did it, maybe we did it, and we understand the difference. But a hooker is a lonely, desolate sort of role in the middle there. And it makes me think about the size as well. The All Blacks have a guy named Tamati Williams, who I met in Cape Town on top of Table Mountain. And I mean, just to take a selfie together, I'm a big bear. I couldn't get my arm around the guy. So you look at Bongi with sort of short arms. How do you get there? How do you, encompass your tighthead and keep him safe?
Yeah, it is amazing. It's one of the positions that's massively diverse. You think of a guy like Krobler, who's just on the fringes of the box squad. He's not weak, but he's a small guy, and he can still fulfill a role at international level. Then, as you say, you've got the Bongis and like Dweber's the same. He's the same size as a baobab tree. I mean, he's flipping giant, and so it doesn't. But your point is valid, because it doesn't always translate into scrum power. It's the same as, you get a huge guy and you'll be a great tighthead. The next thing he'll be popped, like a champagne cork every weekend, because it obviously takes technique. And also, you need to want to scrum. It's one of the few places in the sporting world where it's man-on-man warfare. And there's only one winner and one loser. And it's much more so loosehead, tighthead, because it's literally one-on-one. But eventually the hooker also becomes some man-on-man warfare. And there's a couple of things you can do. I mean, nowadays, you have to have that break foot out, which gives the scrum a bit more stability. So throughout the whole setup process, the hooker now has to keep his right foot out, which wasn't the case in the old days, which has deloaded the set a little bit, but also made it more stable. And then, obviously the feed, which is a bugbear for many, has literally become a skew feed. There's not much of a hook. The law states that you do need to hook, but realistically, you just got to give a glimpse of a foot. The ball goes under the loosehead's legs, and it's underneath it's at the eighth man's foot. So while you do have to keep that right foot out, the ref, as I said earlier, is looking at 77 million things. One of the last things he's going to look at is the right foot of the hooker. And so what happens is that if you have a good scrummaging hooker, and a hooker who's willing to scrummage, is he'll get that right foot back one way or another, and becomes a third front rower. And then they have freedom with their shoulders. And that's where the art of scrummaging hooker comes. And that's when the other law that, like, a lot of people might not know, is that a prop is not allowed to hide his shoulder behind the hooker. So you have to pull that shoulder out. Again, it's impossible for a ref to spot that unless he's really looking. So if you sneaky and you can hide you hide your prop shoulders behind yours as a hooker, you then have your left and right shoulder to act as a rudder, and to bring down pressure upon not only the opposite hooker, but also the loosehead who's coming in, and potentially the tighthead. But it's more about getting those feet back, getting your hips and height aligned, and then working together as a unit. But there is you definitely get strong scrummaging hookers, and you get hookers that aren't, and they make a massive difference. And I've learned that by working with the props who tell me about the hookers that are so good.
It's very interesting, actually, the way they load differently. So in one way, the hooker actually turns to his left, almost face to face, gets really snug, and then comes to the right, gets really snug, and then comes together. And other teams go all three together down almost before and almost into a crouch, and then they come forward. There's so many different ways to load this. And I think since you're going to have about 35 seconds, 45 seconds of somewhat silent setup, that's where they get involved as a commentator. Talk about that. Like, notice the differences between how the British and Irish Lions are loading their scrum and the Wallabies are doing it, because it's interesting. All the things you said, it's true, but still there's tighthead scrums. Sometimes even if you throw the ball under the lock's feet, the defending team can still get the ball back through penalty or pushing them off the ball. It seems to me that in some ways, we're in the golden age of scrums. We just need to notice it. We just need to make sure that people realize how fun it can be. Take us through the role of the locks. We kind of covered the front row now. What does a lock do? What is the difference between a tighthead lock and a loosehead lock? And how much impetus can they give your scrum?
Yeah, Harry, they are massively important. And just before I get to that, it's interesting, so there are still different systems around the world. The Irish perhaps were the first to have the system that I like, which is all the back five come off their knees. So your locks are on their knees, the flanks on knees, and I like my 8 to be on his knees with his head already bound in between the locks, and he brings them up with his shoulders. But the All Blacks have gone off-piste completely. So they have both locks, knees up, So that I presume the thinking is that so the big thing that you try and avoid is coming forward before you need forward power. I know that sounds weird, but the scrum is entirely about setting it up so that you get the best set you possibly can. And if your back five come up and they push forward, what happens to your front row is that they get pushed, and that's when you get pinged for coming early.
Right.
So there's an incredible skill to having your back five come up without pushing the front row forward. So the key ingredient is to allow your front row, your props, to get their bind first, then to get their outside feet back, and then have your back five come up. Get that wrong, and the pressure comes forward, and then you get the pen or the short arm for going early. More often than not, it's because the back five have come up slightly early. And when I say slightly early, it is a third or half of a second. It is unbelievable. It is something that I would spend, almost 70% of my time on getting right, and youngsters really struggle. So what the Kiwis are doing are locks on both feet. I think it looks incredibly unstable, but they eventually get it right. But to your point, a strong scrummaging lock makes a huge difference. And in an ideal world, you'd have your big block of timber behind the tighthead, for the very reason that you want your tighthead to be a block of granite. You also want your tighthead lock to be immovable. You want him nice and heavy, getting into a good loaded shape. When I say loaded shape, it's that in between 90 degrees and long legs, so you can add something. Whereas your loosehead lock is probably your jumper. So you want the right-hand side of your scrum to be heavy, powerful. And again, so what the Boks have got right is that they've got Pieter-Steph on that side. So they'll have Flippen, Malherbe, or Wilke, or Neethling. Then they'll have Eben, and then they'll have Pieter-Steph. And in the old days, it was Dwayne, but now it's Visa. You want to talk about a loaded right-hand side of a scrum. It is astonishing, truly astonishing. And it just makes such a big difference. So I think, partly Pieter-Steph, I always thought it was brilliant to have his skills as a lock, because you get loose forward skills as a lock. But I must say, I've evolved to thinking that he adds huge value as a 7, because he also just adds so much power to that scrum. And then your open sider, your jumping lock is more on your left-hand side, and that just makes the left-hand side of the scrum slightly more agile.
What I love about Pieter-Steph on the flank as well is he's a proper serious scrummager. He gets down in that stance, he's really low, and he's driving. You can see that his face gets red, so he's actually exerting some pressure. His arms are so long that he can point out to the referee when something is wrong on the other side by touching it. He goes, look here. And because he's Pieter-Steph, he's not lying. So, of course, you have to believe him. So I think it is a hidden weapon. In teaching your young guys around all these issues, do you have to come up with, infinite metaphors? I know Don Humans talked about the harbor. And do you have to just keep telling different ways? Because it does seem like everyone's learning differently, and, Gen Zed is different. And you've got to actually explain these things in metaphors, no?
Indeed. So yeah, I love Don. I've had the privilege of having a good couple of chats to him, and in fact, fairly recently, I had a chat to him at a coaching course that we were both at, and so he speaks about Harvard too, which is basically sink. I said, well, bull dustman, you can't only. And all the flippant English sides in the Western Cape or in South Africa are going Markham Klein or Harvard 2. So Markham Klein, it just means take space. And then Harvard 2 is a sink. So, and I thought the sink was a bit boring. So my English version is we go mole hunting. And so so Markham Klein is I'll leave that Don. I have a couple of calls, but basically, I say, if you give that guy space, he's going to come into your house and he's going to steal your black labels. So you stop him from coming into your house. So I say, keep him from coming into your house.
For our global listeners and watchers, Markham Plain is like making someone small, to
yes, exactly.
steal the space from him.
Yeah. So you make the space small, and it's especially important for a tight head. You want to keep that loosehead in his box. So my complaint is to make that space small. And then my SOTI, or my English version of Harvard 2, is mole hunting. And that generally happens, so after the bind call, as you're about to set, I like my pack to sink a little bit. And that's when Don will talk about Harvard 2, I talk about mole hunting. And you just have a slight sink just before the set. So you come in just slightly lower than the other pack, and it's very, very difficult to get away from that. And then the other metaphor I speak about is I talk about a sledgehammer with a blade on the front. So your front row is the blade, and there's a sledgehammer, which are the back five, and the back five bring the power, and the front row are literally just the blade in front. And the sharper you make that, the more you're going to cut. But yeah, it's like any educator. You've got to come up with sayings or things that people that you're talking to relate to. So you're often coming up with different ways of explaining the same thing.
No, I think it's fantastic, and people gravitate towards it. I was working with a team in Monterrey, Mexico, like I said, and I was having trouble with them on the scrum. They just weren't getting it. I was trying to explain the difference of the tighthead and loosehead. So I told them a story, Tank, which was the Blue Route Mall, Takai Road. And I said there was this beautiful ballerina who wanted me to be in a dance contest, Saturday Night Fever, Grease era. And she said, Harry, you just got to stand there, Don't. It was before I had moves like Jagger. So she said, just look cool. Look, like a big pole, and then I'll do all the stuff around you, and then we'll never get tapped on the shoulder. So it's, like 50 cap couples that come around, they're tapping you. It's disco era. And I'm just doing my thing, which is nothing. And I'm being solid, immovable. And she's doing all these twirls, she's being Andrew Porter and hot. So, the judges liked her. And then we're going, and then there's like 3 couples left. And I go, yeah, but what if I got to move? And then I think I'm going to do this thing, move my arse this way, that way, tap on the shoulder. We're out. Penalty. I'm carded. She's so upset with me forever. So I was trying to explain that, and this really resonated with the Latin guys. They were like, oh, yeah. So, you never know where you're going to find your metaphor. And I think one of the cool things about being the sort of Ted Lasso coach nowadays, you just keep trying different stuff until the light bulb comes on. I'm fascinated by the fact that you've been working with Fouché, Neethling Fouché, great man, funny guy. Anyone who hasn't been on Tank's, you got to get on Tank's socials. They're really great. It's about a meet, and there's a sky, and there's scrums, and there's all kinds of things. Talk to me about Fouché, 32 years old, sort of he and Asanati Bakanye coming into the picture, probably with Boan Fenter. What is it like, working with him? He seems like a really funny guy.
God, Neethling's a beaut. He deserves a. I know he got some time against the Barbars, and I really hope he gets an official cap in the near future. I mean, he's earned it. It's just been fascinating to work with a guy like him. Maybe just 2 stories that speak to who Neethling is. The most recent one was just before he joined up the box. We spent 45 minutes talking about moving his right foot 3 centimeters. And his attention to detail is unbelievable. So he'd obviously spent some time with Don, and Neethling is an overthinker. He will watch his scrum clips 4 million times, and then he'll watch them again. And he thinks about every single thing. And I don't know if some people will have noticed that he's quite precise in getting that bind and then getting that right foot back, to the point that Don said, let's stop, Chom. That's just a little bit too slow. So we need to speed that up. To my point earlier, where the scrum is just getting yourself ready to have the best possible hit. Don is a huge believer in that, massive believer. So he said to Neethling, he said, listen, you got to be a bit quicker. And the way that he was going to do that was obviously he's going to be a bit quicker with his right arm, but he was also going to change the positioning of his right foot, which we did. And it was literally 3 centimeters further back, so that as he was getting his bind, he could get back into that loaded position quicker. But, we took some clips, we took pictures, and it was fascinating. 45 minutes, that's basically almost 3 scrum blocks that I might get in a pro environment. And he would be doing that in his own time. And that's what I love about him, is his attention to detail. And then the other thing is that, I've been probably working with him for, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years, whatever. No, probably 3 or 4 years. And he wasn't as attacking as I thought he could be. He was getting a little bit long in the leg. And so over a period of time, and obviously, he's at provincial scrum coaches, he's at national scrum coaches. It's definitely, it's not all to do with me. He just happened to like working with me, and he did his extras with me. And I think slowly over time, we've turned him into a slightly more attacking tighthead. That is who I am as a scrum coach. I like an attacking front row, I like an attacking scrum. I think you must have a go. I mean, otherwise, that's the fun part. It's like going to a dance. You got to ask the pretty girl to dance if you wanted to dance with you. And just slowly but surely, we got his stance a little bit more towards 90 than 120, and got him just slightly more attacking. And he just bought into that process, and slowly but surely, he's become a machine. He's a nicely attacking tighthead now, and I personally think, together with Wilco, that's a combination the box could use for a very long time still. So just an absolute gent and a pleasure to work with. But it's just amazing to see the professionalism and the amount of time that he's willing to dedicate to his craft has been something to behold, and just an honor and a privilege to be a part of. It's given me insight as to that's what it takes to become an international sportsman. You need to be able to and want to put in all that extra time. Otherwise, you don't get that 1%. Who was it? His name escapes me, the coach who came up with the 1%er. If you're getting just 1% better at every session, sure, but you're going to become a very good player. And Neethling is basically the epitome of 1%ers. He gets 1% better at every session.
I find that very interesting about the psychology of it. Not approaching, for all the young coaches out there, not approaching your entire team as a monolith. Each one is one might be overthinking, another might be underthinking. There was a great piece I saw about a coach saying, you want to bring, it was Wimbledon, and he was talking about let the doubts in, let them come through and then go to the good side. Don't try to stop it, because otherwise, in the middle of the scrum, when you back down suddenly, then the doubt's going to hit you. So many tricks like that as coaching. I think it's fascinating. Hey, by the way, everyone wondering where MV is, he's watching over us, Tank and I. He's investigative journalist, and he's going to do something about this thing that you just mentioned, Tank, which is this lift in the middle of general play to form a maul that was purloined from Paul Ruiz, and we have found the coaches who came up with the goods. So he's putting that together. We're going to talk to those guys, and let me tell you, that chuffed that the world's #1 coach, the most famous, most influential coach, had the humility and also cheekiness to refer to them and not take the credit for it, but say, "No, I was just watching Paul Ruiz." So Tank, tell me about as we go forward now into this season, what do you think there's a passing of the guard? I know Kitsoff tragically, obviously had the injury. Trevor looks like he's kind of, swan song, and Franzov is battling back from some injuries as well. Do you feel like 2025 is a watershed year, or is it just a matter of seeing maybe some new faces and who can handle it? Can Asanati do it? Obviously Fouché in general play is amazing, but can he handle the scrum part? Or do you think we are watching a new era?
I think what Rossi's done is, he's factually a genius. He just is. And one of the ways he's made rugby different and better is his ability to grow squad depth. I think it's almost the best thing that he has done to the Boks is that he has brought in players and have them work with experienced players. And, traditionally, maybe in the past, you'd see, okay, well, the A side play this week and the B side play this week, and A side, B side. And he has been much more integrated. And so when you say changing of the guard, yes, perhaps, yes, because I think we are going to lose those three props to age, to injury, sadly. Bongi's also in his twilight. I'm not sure Joseph Dweber was ever in, but he's going to go to the UK now. So yeah, I think there is going to be some change. But the reason why, it's not a big drama or anything, and that's the genius of Rugby is that we have people here and they are ready. So yeah, I think on the left hand, you'd think to lose a player of the ability of Kitshoff, most countries would be broken. But Ox is coming into his own. I think Wessels needs to make a decision, or someone needs to make a decision. And I was of the belief that hooker is his position, but we are overstaffed there, and I think he's worked incredibly hard on his scrummaging. So he's a real option at Loosehead. And the one area where I perhaps slightly disagree with Rugby is that I still think Thomas du Toit is a brilliantly attacking Loosehead. I see. He said that when Visa got carded on the weekend, he brought in Ox after 33 minutes, and his explanation was that Ox is more of a specialist Loosehead, whereas he was saying that du Toit is now seen as a tighthead. So he wanted to bring on his specialist. Du Toit, for me, I've watched him over a long period of time. I've seen that man do some damage at Loosehead. I think he's incredibly very attacking, good Loosehead. So he's worth his salt there. I mean, the fact that he's been able to do so well at tighthead for Bath is just a credit to him. And he's probably one of the very, very few now who could consider himself a swing prop. And it's interesting that Rassie sort of sees him now more as a tighthead, but I would have him on the Loosehead side. Then there's Bone Fenter, who's an animal, and then there's Stennekamp. I mean, that's astonishing depth. Then on the other side, if as you say, for me, Wilco has earned his stripes as a starter. Neethling could start, but he'd be amazing off the bench. Sanati's lost all those kgs, and he's starting to look the part. And then you got Tom du Toit, who definitely can do a job, given that he's played 2 seasons at tighthead there for Bath. So relatively well stocked. For me, there's no red flags, there's no alarm bells. Oh, and we still got Vincent Koch, who I think will probably find himself, edged out, given all of those names that I've just off the top of my head. So yes, a changing of the guard, but certainly no red flags or alarm bells. We'll just transition into, the pack will just maintain its integrity and its ability.
Mr. Incredible turns into Mr. Reliable. Vincent Koch, he's so good that he just sort of sails along. This is our last one because I know I respect your time, but and it's about this idea. And I heard a Kiwi analyst talking about how Rassie's one of his most important innovations was to to elevate the role of the bomb squad in such a way that people were clamoring to be in it. They wanted to be in it. And so erasing the difference between the starter and the bench, and it built such a team ethos and I think it's always been about mismatches. To me, you can put a different front row on at certain times and very much disrupt another team. And you're talking about height. If you put on a Bongi, Ox, Trevor or Wilco kind of squat bodies, and then you could have a tall, you could have, Thomas, who does, to be fair, probably looks more like a tighthead, but a tall loosehead, Franz Malherbe on either side, Mark, and you have so you can just keep throwing mixes and matches. So do you feel like this is something that is preloaded nowadays, or are they in the box the coaches at 35 minutes, 55 minutes, making real-time changes. Gone are the days where it's preloaded. 55 minutes, Yanni Duplessis goes off and this guy comes on. Is it more like in the moment they're looking for mismatches at the scrum?
I'd love to say mismatches, but I have some insight as to how Rassie runs the box, and it is incredible the level of detail of planning that goes into that in terms of which team is going to be playing when. Look, it's not dictated to, but he pretty much has the year planned out. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was down to timing of subs. That is the level of detail that I hear goes into how he runs the box. So players will know that they're not going to play these two games, but they're likely to start this game. You'll probably get 18 minutes against, so that said, though, they're not morons. And a situation like Saturday arises, Visa gets a red card, and you make an early sub, and everyone can adapt. I do think it's less about mismatches now. And I think what's happened in rugby is that defense rules. I wrote a column I called them walls of science. It's just without doubt, it's been the thing in rugby that has developed the most and the quickest, and it's influenced hugely by the level of conditioning and just the brawn and the ability to move quickly. Defense they are incredibly tough to break. So how do you break them? One of the easiest ways is, the loophole in the law at the moment for me is I still think the maul is legalized obstruction. Is factually, the people in front of the ball. It's a fact. In no other part of the game are you allowed to do that, apart from the scrum. But that's a restart. I've come to terms with it. It is what it is. If the powers that be want to keep it in the game, then the coaches must use it. And I promise you, we do. We spend a lot of time on defending mauls and setting up mauls. And I think the bomb squad is primarily aimed at, okay, how do we break defenses? It's very risky to send the ball to the wing and hope that you recycle, even if you've got, even if you had Jonah Lomu, even if you've got a massive oak and you've got 3 quick flankers you can get there, it's still risky. That's 5-6 passes, plus you've got to win a breakdown. Maul, you line out ball, and you got 5-6 oaks in harness, and you practice it until the cars come home. So I think the primary reason for 7-1-6-2 is because that is the easiest way to break a defense in rugby.
Yeah.
And your job as a coach is to win a rugby game. Your job is thus to break a defense and score tries, and that is the easiest way to do it. And I really think it's as simple as that.
Thank my brother. It's been amazing to have you on. Listen, we could just keep talking forever. I owe you 4 or 5 beers when I'm in Cape Town next month, and we're going to have those and talk about some other stuff. But welcome to the Lekker Rugby Pod. Please come back sometime, and maybe we can talk about interesting scrum conundrums that come up in this box season.
Hey, it's been a true pleasure. I must say, I've enjoyed it immensely, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megafoon Rugby.